Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome back to Hot Mess Life Coach. I am your host, Brian Hogan, both a hot mess and a life coach. And this is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to be falling apart. And I like to make it clear that I always say the world seems to be falling apart because I do not believe for 1 second that the world is actually falling apart. I believe things are moving right along as they are supposed to. We are being guided divinely. Well, we are being divided. We're being divided by the media. We're being divided by politics. We're being divided probably deliberately by a lot of forces out there, but we don't have to be divided. Division is an illusion. We can become unified anytime we want to. That's not actually what I want to talk to you about today, but the slip of the tongue came out, so I thought I would address it. I think we are being divinely guided towards a hopeful, better future, and we are living through a transformation of human consciousness. So with that said, I'll get on to today's topic. And like I said, this is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to be falling apart. And today what I want to talk to you about is how to be authentically messy and imperfect, because we basically live in a culture that expects us to be perfect all the time. Or it's actually sort of a confusing culture that expects perfection on one hand, but sort of reviles perfection on the other hand. And so perfection is a losing game. It's a lose-lose battle. Like I prefer to have win-win propositions, around me or in my life or in business or in relationships, and trying to be perfect all the time in a world where cultural perfection is impossible is actually a lose-lose scenario, because you disappoint yourself, you disappoint the people around you, and you've also violated your integrity by trying to achieve something that your heart and the soft animal of you doesn't want to achieve, which is cultural perfection. None of us deep down in the core of our being give two craps about cultural perfection, but we're taught to give a crap. And so we think we give a crap, but the truth is we don't give a crap. So how do you do it? How do you become authentically messy and imperfect? Well, the short answer is you've got to own it. You don't just show up in your incompetence, but you have to be proud of your incompetence. I don't know a thing. I don't know about this. That's fine. That's great. We love that, actually. Not the authenticity is sort of rising up to the surface as the new thing that people identify with, that we're getting over the glitz and the glam and the perfection of Hollywood. And so it doesn't mean you're not teachable. It doesn't mean you're not humble. It doesn't mean you're arrogant, but what it means is you're pretending. You're not pretending anything anymore. You're not pretending to be an expert. You're not pretending to be anything at all that you are not in any way at all. Not pretending is what authenticity is, no matter how we think it makes us look. So, if you're pretending that you're a good cook and then you go and sneakily get a store-bought pie and bring it to family dinner, you're worried the whole time whether somebody's going to call you out on that's a store-bought pie. And so you're actually creating anxiety through pretending. That's just a ridiculous, terrible example that I came up with on the spot just now, because I'm showing up right now messy and imperfect too. But you get the idea. And so why imperfection? Why do we want to strive to be imperfect? Well, we don't want to strive at all. Striving, we want to leave behind. We just want to embrace our imperfection. We want to allow our imperfection because it is what we have. We have perfection on the mystical level, which I talked about in previous episodes, but on the cultural level, like what culture means by perfection, which is like to never make a mistake and to never be in error in any way, is ridiculous and impossible and actually, frankly, kind of boring. So the thing with imperfection, though, is that it's a dichotomy or a paradox. In our culture, imperfection is both revered and reviled. We're taught to strive for perfection because in school, like we all grew up, we went through this, at least in the West, we went through this westernized school system, and we're taught to raise your hand, and you're taught to raise your hand not to be a free thinker, but to give the right answer, to give the correct answer to a question. And if you don't get the answer correct, you're shamed. And we're not encouraged to think. We want to get the A. We want to pass the test by regurgitating the answer that was taught to us by the teacher. This is a recipe for an embedded sense of we must be perfect. We must be perfect is taught to us in schools by the way schools are, not by the, not, it's not like the lesson, you must be perfect, is like taught to us by teachers. They try to teach us, hey, it's okay to be imperfect. But the way the school system is set up teaches us that we need to be perfect. So we're actually getting these two conflicting messages all the time. Because on the other hand, we're repeatedly told that nobody is perfect. And imperfection is held up in our poetry and our art as something beautiful. You know, we heal stronger in the broken places, we're told. And so it's okay to be imperfect. And yet, based on the way the school system is, and based on the way achievement culture is, and the way you go about getting promotions or getting ahead in this world, perfection is seen both as something to be admired and something to avoid. So what do we do? I mean, I teach screenwriting, and one of the main things I teach my students is that nobody likes a character without flaws, because we can't relate to that. So we can't identify with it. And if we can't identify with it, then we are going to reach for the remote control and we're going to change the channel. So we talk about like getting the audience to jump into the skin of your character. And part of the way the audience jumps into the skin of a main character or any character is by showing their weaknesses, showing their flaws, showing the dark thoughts they have, that we all have, that we have to pretend because of culture that we don't have. That's why we love movies and television so much, because when we're watching them, we're seeing a window into some kind of truth that culture denies us seeing, which is the truth of the beauty of imperfection, the beauty of not knowing it all, the beauty of being weak, of being flawed, of making mistakes, of getting it wrong. Excuse me. Well, for me, the answer that makes the most sense when it comes to how to embrace our imperfection or whether to strive for perfection is to do the one that's possible. And perfection is simply not possible for me. I don't know about you, but it's just not possible. I've tried pretending, I've tried being imperfect, and it just makes my heart race. So like, I'll give you an example. Until recently, I was sort of putting all this pressure on myself to show up perfectly in my clinical mental health counseling grad program that I'm in. I was doing really lengthy discussion posts. I'm in an online program. So for those of you that do online learning, you know that you have to do discussion posts every week. And I was doing these really lengthy discussion posts, and I was overachieving on all my assignments, but I was also exhausted, and I was grumpy, and I was getting really sick of it. And this is a topic that actually fascinates me, and yet I was still getting sick of it. So the thing is, some of the stuff they were teaching us seemed really useful to my career as a counselor, and some of it just seemed like busy work designed to check boxes for some kind of accrediting body. And so despite all of this, I was still trying to be perfect, because it was a cultural lie that I was knee deep in believing, even though I've gotten loads of coaching around this. But so the coaching is what helped me, though, because it made me realize that I was doing this, that I was caught in this false belief about perfection. And once I realized that, I was able to start relaxing. And what I realized in that relaxation was that nobody liked reading my lengthy discussion posts anyway. I didn't like writing them. Nobody liked reading them. That's what I mean by a lose-lose situation. I was losing in writing posts that were not authentic to me, because I was taking too long and adding words just to say things, just to get an A. And like I know that people didn't want to read them, because when my classmates write lengthy discussion posts, I'm like, oh my God, because we have to read those and we have to respond to them. So I would much rather respond to the shorter posts, because they're easier to read, they're easier to respond to, and they take less time. So my overachieving, my pursuit of perfection was helping exactly nobody, not even me. I wasn't learning anymore. I was resenting that. So it was busy work. So I wasn't absorbing it deeply, because I had left fascination behind. I had left curiosity behind and replaced it with this desire to be perfect, with this need for perfection. And the need for perfection actually made it so I was absorbing the material less fully, because I was distracted by how I look to the outside world, rather than being like fully absorbed in the task at hand. And, being that way is certainly not going to help my future clients, who a lot of them are going to be coming to me looking for ways to relax. And if I can't find a way to relax myself, then how am I going to live it to give it, which is one of the core principles in our coaching program, is that you got to live it to give it. Also, here's another example. Like twice this year, I got extremely sick. Once for a few days back in September, and once for a single day 2 weeks ago. And in both cases, I added all of this stress and like this added layer of to my sickness, because I was worried about my schedule. Like I was feeling like not feeling well was going to force me to drop the ball and be less perfect at sticking to my schedule and get less of the things done that I had planned to get done. And you know what happened? Exactly nothing. I had to cancel a whole day of activities and plans 2 weeks ago. And in September, I had to cancel an entire few days of plans. And there were no consequences, literally zero, not a single consequence. And that made me realize that the standard of perfection that I hold myself to is all in my head. The pressure I had been putting on myself was exactly that, pressure I had been putting on myself. It wasn't coming from out there. My life could be easier. My life could be more fun, more relaxing if I would just let it be. So the getting ill these 2 times this fall was actually a huge gift to me, because it allowed me to see clearly. And I needed to learn the lesson twice, I suppose, which is why I had that single bout of food poisoning 2 weeks ago. I mean, that and eating old chicken. But I like to think the old chicken was divinely inspired to help me learn this lesson. So I look at everything as like, what is life trying to teach me? And in this case, it was trying to teach me that I could remove whole chunks, whole blocks, whole things off my schedule, and nothing bad was going to happen to me. Nothing at all. Like my grades didn't suffer. My appointments didn't suffer. Nobody suffered. The only one that suffered was me, who was running back and forth to the toilet every hour on the hour for a day 2 weeks ago. Sorry if that's TMI. But that's what it took for me to learn this divine lesson about slowing down, showing up in authenticity, in imperfection, and being messy about it. Sometimes food poisoning is just the gift that we need. So now I'm learning how to become an expert canceller of things on my schedule that are just there because they're self-imposed deadlines. It's stuff I want to do. It's stuff I want to get done, but it doesn't mean it has to get done in the time frame that I'm trying to get it done in. It doesn't mean I have to overwhelm myself every week and schedule myself to the hilt. As my wise life coach and mentor once quipped to me a few weeks back, why put off until tomorrow what you can cancel? And I love that, because it's such a great question. Why would I put off until tomorrow what I can just cancel, what I can just bag it on my schedule? So now I'm learning to be messier in my routine. I'm learning to take it more as it comes. And I'm learning to make less plans and plan less contingencies around the plans that I do make. I'm learning to be messy. The trick is to be imperfect and be messy, though, in a way that still fits in with your integrity. So like what I'm describing to you, if it resonates with you, then go ahead and be messy and imperfect in exactly this way. Great. But if it doesn't resonate with you, the main thing is not that you do things messily. Like you don't violate your own integrity. If you're a neat freak, you can do things. There's nothing wrong with being a neat freak. Like there's nothing wrong with being a planner. It's not about any of those things. Those were triggers for me specifically. So that's why I told you those stories. But I want to give you guys like a sort of 3-step process you can use on your own to help you own your own imperfection. And step 1 in that process is don't pretend. So, people can tell if you're pretending, first of all, about anything. And second, it's bad for you. It's bad for your soul because it's false. And our bodies respond by being relaxed when we're in truth. They respond to the truth. So, own where you dropped a ball, or own it where you were unprepared or you didn't know the answer. When you forgive yourself for your imperfections, you're more likely to elicit forgiveness from other people, and you're actually more likely to be able to forgive other people. So just don't pretend. Don't pretend that the store-bought pie is a pie that you made. Don't do it, because it's just exhausting. It's you're having to keep a social mask on that nobody is expecting you to be wearing but you. Like nobody pays any attention to our lives but us, for the most part. Like this idea that everyone's out there watching for us to make a mistake is absolutely inherently false. People are self-absorbed. I'm self-absorbed. You're self-absorbed if you're being really honest. And so we're not out there watching what other people are doing, waiting for them to mess up. If anything, we're watching other people and admiring them because we think they're better than us. So like if you're not out there watching for people to make a mistake so you can go, aha, you made a mistake, there's nobody else out there doing that for you either. They're too busy. They have busy lives. They have too much going on. So that's step 1. Don't pretend anything, okay? Just don't pretend. If you can help it, don't pretend. If you need help figuring out where you're pretending, then seek help from a life coach. You can book an appointment with me on my website, or you can find a life coach in your area you trust, or you can just ask yourself this question: what are the activities in my life that I do that cause my body to clench up, or that I feel a dread about? Those are very likely areas where you're pretending in some way, and you can help. Those questions can help you gain a little bit of awareness about where you could pretend less. Okay, so step 2 is take the pressure off. Because perfection is a fantasy, because nobody has it, people are, like I was saying, they're mostly self-absorbed anyway. So the idea that anyone is watching and waiting for you to fail is totally absurd. It's like mind trash that simply has no basis in fact. We are all thoroughly self-absorbed in our own lives. So that's one way to take the pressure off. Just remember that nobody's watching you. Nobody cares about the mistakes you're making. They don't. Everyone's preoccupied with the mistakes they perceive themselves to be making. Another way you can take the pressure off is with time frames. So if you're under self-imposed deadlines, which is a lot of my deadlines are self-imposed. I mean, I have some for school, I have some appointments, but beyond those, my schedule is actually pretty flexible, but it doesn't always seem flexible to me when I put all these blocks on my calendar. And then that kind of starts to make me feel a little bit exhausted. And so what I've started to do now is play with the time frames of my self-imposed deadlines. So when you have self-imposed deadlines, just because you want to get something done by a certain time, double it. Just double it. One of the best ways I've found to accomplish goals that are self-led is to be playful, to be in the creative state of flow, and to be at ease. And in order to do that, in order to be playful, in order to be creative, in order to be at ease, a rule of thumb when setting goals is to think about how long it will take you to accomplish this goal without feeling pressure. So, you think, okay, I'm trying to build a tree house and it's going to take me 3 months. Then you just, once you figure that out, you double it. You just double the time frame and you give yourself 6 months, and then you're able to be playful. You're able to be creative. You're able to be at ease about it. Maybe you get it done in 3, maybe you get it done in 4.5, maybe it takes all 6, but either way, the entire time of doing that goal is going to be more enjoyable, because self-imposed deadlines are just that, self-imposed. And we can make them deadlines that still allow for a modicum of joy, that still allow for a cascade and a flood of joy. So you can just double it just like that. Here's a story. So I'm learning trauma release exercises called TRE. And, I had this self-imposed deadline that I was going to finish my certification program by the end of 2022. And then at the beginning of November, I started to feel all this pressure because a lot of things have come up for me in December. I'm going away for 2 weeks in December. I'm finishing 2 of my classes with finals for the grad program. I teach classes and there's finals and grading to do for all of those classes as well. And so I remembered this thing about doubling it. And I was like, well, okay, Brian, you could do that too. And so I had 2 months left on my self-imposed deadline for finishing trauma release exercises, which would have been like end of December 2022. And instead I just said, okay, now it's going to be end of February 2023. And I feel so much happier. I gotta say, I'm just so much happier. The deadline was completely of my own making. And so I just moved it. Literally, I just moved it just like that. And you can do that too. We are just freer as humans than we think we are. I'm also in a certification program for EFT tapping, which is the exposure therapy combined with Chinese acupressure theory. And they offer a 6-month extension on that program. So I was meant to finish that one by June of 2023. And I was even feeling the pressure on that because I'm in grad school too. And I just want to get all these things done because I want to learn. I want to know how to do them. I want to be able to help my clients with them. I want to be able to help my own healing with them. But I just decided to take the 6 months extension. Same thing. I did that around the same time. I doubled the TRE deadline. I essentially doubled the EFT deadline, which I had 7 months left. And now I have 14 months left. And so I also feel so much better about that one as well, literally so much happier. And so now I have until December of 2023. And I may still get it done by June, but I'm not pushing. I don't have to be pushing. I'm just moving along. I'm going with the flow. So that's step number 2. Take the pressure off. Step number 1, don't pretend. Step number 2, take the pressure off. If the pressure doesn't have to be there because of some external deadline, then why are you living your life under pressure? I mean, really, why? Life is a gift. It's meant to be lived. It's meant to be joyful. We're meant to have fun. Like, I don't know any kid under the age of 12 who really puts all kinds of pressure on themselves deliberately to get something done by a deadline. They're just looking for the next best way to have fun, because that's human nature. That's our true nature. Okay. And step 3 is to show up anyway. So this is what I'm talking about now. Here is like when you don't feel ready, when you feel like, okay, I'm still not doing this thing perfectly. So what? Most people make the mistake of not following through when they don't think they can do something perfectly. But that is actually the big mistake, because we learn by taking action, imperfect action repeatedly. Think of it like the gym. The first reps you take aren't going to be perfect. You're weak and you're feeble. And, at least at the gym, for me, like a lot of the time, I'm weak and feeble. I'm jiggly, I'm wiggly, but I show up anyway. And the more you do the reps, the more solid the reps become. The more solid your body becomes, the more efficient and proficient you become. That happens because you're taking action, and you're taking imperfect action repeatedly. It doesn't matter if you feel ready. I mean, what is ready? Nobody's ever ready. As Peter B. Parker told Miles Morales in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, it takes a leap of faith. It's sometimes you just got to jump. So you're never going to feel ready, but you may start to feel tired of not taking action. So just show up anyway. Show up in your total lack of readiness, without pretending, without the pressure, and just dive in. That's what keeps us from showing up, is because we feel the pressure and we feel like we have to pretend. But if you don't have to pretend and you can get rid of the pressure, then you can show up anyway in your total beautiful imperfection. Brene Brown has a book actually called The Gifts of Imperfection. And here's a quote from her book that I want to read because it's so beautiful and it illustrates this point perfectly. So this is Brene Brown for you all. Practicing courage, compassion, and connection in our daily lives is how we cultivate worthiness. The key word is practice. Mary Daly, a theologian, writes, courage is like, it's a habit, it's a virtue. You get it by courageous acts. It's like you learn to swim by swimming, you learn courage by couraging. The same is true for compassion and connection. We invite compassion into our lives when we act compassionately towards ourselves and others, and we feel connected in our lives when we reach out and connect. And this holds true for any realm. Like, you learn courage by couraging, you learn weightlifting by weightlifting, you learn swimming by swimming, you learn how to embrace imperfection by showing up imperfectly and doing what you do. Like me right now today, with my scratchy voice and with a halfway prepared talk. I'm showing up imperfectly to give you my 2 cents or 5 cents on showing up messy and imperfect. And I'm doing it messily and imperfectly because I'm not perfect. And if I waited till I was perfect, then I would never be sharing this episode, and episode 11 of Hot Mess Life Coach wouldn't exist. But now it exists for all of you out there watching or in the future listening on the podcast. So the thing is, the need to be perfect is an amplifier of stress. It makes it harder for us to show up for ourselves, and it makes it harder for us to show up for other people in our lives. So by dropping the need to be perfect, you just let this whole thing out. You undo the pressure valve of the need to be perfect being the driver of your life is actually going to run you into the ground. But letting playfulness, letting fun, letting ease, letting fascination and curiosity be the driver of your life is going to help you to build something beautiful that you love and that others can benefit from too. One of the things that you learn as a life coach, and also a client of life coaches, because I get plenty of coaching as well. Still to this day, I keep receiving coaching because we all have blind spots and we're always going to have blind spots. So as a life coach and as a client of life coaches, and now as a counselor in training, one of the things you learn really early on is the importance of being authentic. You don't really learn how to be authentic, but you learn about the importance of being authentic. And then learning how to be authentic comes from trying to show up authentically. You learn authenticity by authenticing. And so, like, when you're juggling the social masks, it's much more tiring. It's like a kind of deceit that you have to keep track of, like that web of lies that gets you into this tangled, what is it? A tangled web we weave if at first we do deceive. The same thing is true of social masks. You end up in a tangled web of like, oh, what is the image that I'm supposed to be projecting here in this particular social setting versus my true self? If you're just always trying to be your true self, you just always are your true self, then it's more relaxing. You have more access to fun. You have more access to creativity and to ease. Being relentlessly yourself seems scarier, but in the end, it is so much easier. But you have to have courage. So you practice courage by couraging, you practice authenticity by authenticating, and you do all this by practicing being yourself. And honestly, nobody is paying that much attention to you anyway. I mean, they're really not. So what have you got to lose? Stop pretending to be perfect. Nobody is buying what we're selling as perfectionists anymore. The veil has dropped, the illusion has lifted, and we know nobody's perfect. And so when we see people actually trying to act perfect, we're just like, oh, grown, boring. So stop it. Stop it. Okay? But just be as flawed idiots. Like, just be a flawed idiot, because as flawed idiots trying to figure our crap out, yeah, people want to see that. It's why we love movies and TV. We love movies and TV because it is a group of messy, flawed idiots trying to pursue a goal, trying to make it in their lives, and it's messy and it's imperfect and it is relatable. Fake flawlessness is not relatable. So be flawed and be free. That's what I have for you all today. And I want to just say thank you so much for tuning in. I really love that you guys come here. I am looking so forward to episode 12 is next week. That's going to be our season finale. And then I will be gone for 3 weeks in December where there won't be any Hot Mess Life Coach, but I'll be back in the first week of January with season 2. But next week we do have one more episode, episode 12. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And I hope to see you next week for the season finale. And if you know anyone who might benefit from what you heard here today, then please share this video or tag them, like it, tweet it, post it, TikTok it, whatever you guys do to videos to make them shareable on social media. And if you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can visit my website at thebrianhogan.com for more information or to apply for coaching. I'll see you all next Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for episode 12. Until then, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Thank you so much. Talk to you all again next week.